We are very we are with Yoga Guru and Yoga Acharya from Indonesia. She is known about Maya Safira, as well known. She is chair of Board of Trustee of Anand Ashram Foundation Indonesia and also chair of Indonesian Association for Ayurveda, Medicine and Yoga. A dedicated work to journey into self and dimensional of promoting health and inner beauty through Ayurveda and Yoga from last 2 decades. And this is also a special gift of awakening hope of suffering, health and minds and communicating directly with one's soul. Her spiritual master is Anand Krishna ji. He introduced her to through meditation, Reiki, Yoga, Ayurveda, and other spiritual practices from various traditions. And he is also a Ayurvedic lifestyle counselor, and is also known as a humanitarian activist, education activist, and also meditation and lifestyle counselor and motivator also. We are welcoming you, madam, in short, and we know you are very good for us and all colleagues for your enlightenment and lectures. Really, madam, please welcoming and please enlightening us on the topic India Indonesia ties from time immemorial. Madam, please welcome. Namaskar.
Thank you very much. Bahut dhanyawad. Namaste. And first of all, I would like to greet you all good afternoon from Bali, Indonesia. And thank you to Professor Gita Singh, who has invited me, and of course, Dr. Sonia Jasrotia, who have invited me, connected me to the University of Delhi. And this is a very respectable and a very good opportunity for me to be able to speak in front of you all. And I would just like to first begin, and maybe a disclaimer, I will not be teaching anything here, but it is more of a sharing. It is more of a sharing session with the topic that I have chosen, India Indonesia ties from immemorial. But before we begin, I would like to just say a prayer invocation. Om, may we all be protected. May we all be nourished. May we work together with great energy. May our intellect be sharpened, and let there be no animosity amongst us, and peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we have started off in a good position here. Yeah. So we will first start with this presentation. If we talk about India Indonesia ties, well, actually, it has started from a very long time. If I say a very long time, since when? Well, we'll see when did it start. But first, I would like to share you this picture. If you see this picture, where do you think these people come from? There are 2 pictures, one to the left and one to the right. Do you see any differences in both pictures? The picture to the left is from Nagaland. And where do you think the picture from the right is from? It is actually from the island of Borneo, or in Indonesia, it's called Kalimantan, and this is the tribe of Dayak tribe. And if you see the next picture, if you see the next picture here, the one to the left, where is it from? And the one to the right, do you see any differences or any similarities? Is it from South America? Maybe it looks like from South America. Okay, anyways, the picture to the left is also from the warriors of Nagaland, and the pictures to the right is warrior also from Dayak. This is so interesting. So many similarities between the two tribes, one in India and one in Indonesia. Physically, they look almost the same. And then traditional clothes wise, they're almost the same. Even the weavings and also the long earrings, not the long earrings, but the long ears, because they consider women, I don't have the picture of the women here, but also this man has a very big ear holes there. But the women are considered beautiful when they do have very long ears. And of course, the tattoos, the weapons, the houses. And what's interesting, they were the last headhunters also, either in Nagaland or in Dayak. And not only that, the tradition, it is very much similar. So why do we find these similarities? Okay, we'll know about that later also. And this is how it started. Before, when it is still called Jambu Dvip, right, the land in the subcontinent, our land in Indonesia is still was called Dvipantara. Maybe all of you will be familiar with the term Swarna Dvip or Java Dvip. So that is where Sumatra and Java is. But the whole archipelago now, that is existing now as Indonesia, was known as Dvipantara. It was written in the classical Sanskrit literature around 7th to 12th century, this era. And actually our connection goes back to the Ramayana. If you are familiar with the story of Ramayana, where when Rama was searching for Sita and he encountered Sugriva. So what happened was Sugriva dispatched his army to Javadvip to find Sita. So even in the Itihas of Ramayana was already mentioned about Javadvip. And this, if we talk about how long ago, maybe this is about 12,000 years ago or 10,000 BC. So the connection was already there. And in one of our local scriptures in Indonesia also, mentioning a king from Dvipantara was a friend of King Dasharatha, and he visited him in Bharat. And vice versa, King Dasharatha also paid a visit to Dvipantara. So the connection has been there since the times of Ramayana. The name Indonesia was only formed in 1884 in Berlin. Before, the name was Dvipantara, and then after that, it changed to Nusantara. This was in 14th, 15th century, and then it changed to Indonesia, right? And this was coined by the West in Singapore by James Richardson Logan in 1847. And it changed again to Indos Nessos, by George Samuel Winston Earl. He was a Scottish. So the names have changed, but in our old scriptures, it was known as Dvipantara, and that was the original name of our Indonesia. Then, of course, it changed to Indonesia in 1884. Besides the Ramayana, if you are familiar with the poet Kalidas, he talked about Dvipantara also in Raghuvamsa. In Canto 6.57, he mentioned the bride is told by her mate that if she choose the ruler of Kalinga for her husband, she could sport with him on the shore of the ocean in the midst of rushing palms, while the winds wafting the flowers of cloves from Dvipantara remove the sweat from her skin. So again, the word Dvipantara was already there. And if we are to, to see that, of course, Kalidas wrote the story of Raghuvamsa according to history that has already happened, not in the 5th century. He lived in the 5th century, but of course the story has already been there. That's why he depicted in Raghuvamsa. So this connection has been there since a very, very long time ago. And not only in Ramayana, it exists also in Mahabharata. But before that, I would like to show you just a very short example of how we do the Indonesian Ramayana dance here in Indonesia, and it's a bit different, of course, in India. This was the occasion that we were invited by ICCR, and our students. We have a school here in Indonesia, in Bali, and we were performing in Delhi. I forgot the big auditorium. I forgot the name of the big auditorium in New Delhi. So we performed there. I would just like to show you a short introduction of how we understand the Ramayana. Okay.
The next performance is by Anand, the Ashram dance troupe from Bali, Indonesia. The institute was founded by Maharishi Anand Krishna, who revived the ancient Gurukul tradition not only in Bali but entire Indonesia. They are of the belief that Rama and also the Pandavas had visited their archipelago during their exile. They also believe that Ghatotkach was from their archipelago when their landmass was connected with the present Indian subcontinent and was collectively called Jambu Dvipa. Sita symbolizes the human soul. She is carried away by Ravana, the world, because of her craving for worldliness, represented by the golden deer. Thus, she is separated from Rama, the supreme soul. And she is held captive in Lanka, the city of mental and emotional cravings. It is only through Hanumana and his devotion and the ring of discipline sent by Rama to check the wavering of mind that she can regain what she lost. But before the ultimate meeting, she must still go through the purification rites to cleanse the soul. Once cleansed, the soul reunites with the Supreme. Presentation on Ramayana by Anand Ashram Dance Troupe from Bali, Indonesia.
Okay, so I couldn't, of course, we don't have time to show the whole dance, but if you see the Hanuman in the Indonesian version is quite skinny, and not like in the Indian version, they're very big and strong. But the strong ones here that we have is actually Ghatotkach. I call this the Ghatotkach factor. So if in America they have the Captain America, in Indonesia we have the superhero Ghatotkach. He's very famous, and of course, as we know, he's the son of Bhim, and in India, the wife is called Hidimba, but in Indonesia, it's called Arimbi. It is believed that when the Pandavas were in exile, they went all the way to the forest where now is in the archipelago of Indonesia. Why do we believe that? Because if there are certain findings of the ancient people there, and even until now, if you've been to Bali, many of the murtis or the statues are like pictures of rakshas. So some parts of this land were the regions of rakshas. And if you see the constructions of the temples, like in Java, like the Borobudur, if you've been to Borobudur, one of the largest Buddhist temple in the world, and also the other ancient temples, the steps are very, very wide. And I remember reading a book by a German historian. He was mentioning, because he was reading the diaries, the journals of the Portuguese traveler to Indonesia in the very earliest time when the Western started coming to Indonesia. They said that Indonesians were very heavy built. They were strong, and they could carry 4 sacks of, bags of rice just by one person. And they were fair skinned and all that. But of course, after the colonialism and of course the famine, the people started getting smaller. And look at me now, I'm like also small because that was the result of the change of the people, the builds of the people. And what is also interesting, that you don't find the children in India named after Gatot. I don't know, I've never heard a name, a son in India named after Gatot. But in Indonesia, it is a very famous name because Gatot is a symbol of strength. It is a symbol of wisdom. It is a strength. It is a symbol of courage. And there are many similarities, of course, in the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Indonesian version and in the Indian version. Some of the characters or some of the names are a bit different. Like, for instance, in the Mahabharata, Rukmini is not too famous in Indonesia. Actually, the one who is famous is Jambavati, who is believed to be the daughter of Jambuvan. And then also we believe that Jambuvan was also part coming from this archipelago. That is why it is very dear to Indonesians, the character of Jambavati, Jambuvan, and Gatot Kaca. And if we ask, like, how did this all happen? How is it possible? It is because we share the same civilization. Before this is what the world looked like before. Yeah, it was one main land. This is what they call the Jambudvip. And if you see now, there are in this picture, there are in the green color is the picture of land sunken, and then the grayish ones are the land present. The archaeological evidence confirms that the origin of civilizations and even of humanity itself in the Indies, that is India and Indonesia, by Professor Arcio Nunes dos Santos, was cited in the Wisdom of Sundaland by Swamiji Guruji Anand Krishna. He's my guru, and he compiled all this data of historians, also nuclear physicists, and also geologists, about the origins of Sundaland, and also this the main big land of the connection between India and Indonesia. So this Sindhu Sunda Saraswati civilizations actually starts from the modern Afghanistan now, even from Persia until the outer limits of Australia. So we don't really say that who colonized who or who imported who. It is actually, we do have the same cultural roots. That is the thing. We see many similarities either in India or Indonesia. And the common heritage also, Southeast Asia is the source of the elements of Western civilization. And that is what Professor Stephen Oppenheimer was saying. He was the British geneticist and expert in his studies. And in his book, it is written that many of the remains that are found in the Sundaland are also found now in the India mainland right now. Why is it called the Sundaland? If you see the picture of the map here, what do you see this as the shape of? Yeah. Okay. So if you see it as the shape of a trunk of an elephant, yeah, that is why it's called Sunda. Well, if we talk about the history, if you're familiar of Mount Toba is in Sumatra, the Swarnadvipa. It exploded around 74,000 years ago. And even the ash can still be found now in the Bay of Bengal. It clouded the skies and the world climate decreased by 16 degrees centigrade. And that's what happened, the change of the geography. And what happened is it clouded the world up to 6 years, right? If you've heard the word Tamasek, it is in Southeast Asia, around Singapore and all. The Tamasek around Southeast Asia, totally near the present Singapore, it was all covered with the dark clouds. That's why it's called Tamasek, maybe from the word Tamas. And new technologies through the satellite pictures and archaeological findings now prove that there was no such thing as cultural invasion or colonization. We do share the same Sanskriti that we all share. And to better understand this history, again, like I was mentioning, the Sunda land is large landmass submerged by rising sea levels between the 15,000 and 3,000 BC. So Sunda land, the word Sunda is actually comes from several Prakrit languages. That means elephant trunk. And I believe in Kannada, is it Kannada language, the elephant trunk is Sondalu. And in Marwati and Marwadi, it's called Son. So you see, it is why the word Sundaland comes from. So as the result, over about 9,000 years before the gradual submergence of most of its landmass, the people of Sundaland migrated to safer places. Of course, most went to north also. And the mention of Salakanagara, again, another ties between, if we call India, Indonesia right now. It is believed to be the first kingdom that exists in the archipelago. But I did not learn this when I was in school. This was considered as a myth or a legend that the first kingdom in the archipelago is called Salakanagara because they didn't find any evidence of the kingdom. So instead, when I was in school, in elementary school, we learned that the first kingdom, Hindu kingdom, in Indonesia was in Kutai. That Kutai is actually in Kalimantan. And the second one is Tarumanagara. But now the history has changed. And I'm so glad now the Department of Education and the Ministry of Education has already changed the history, that the first kingdom in Indonesia is actually now Salakanagara. It's around 130 AD until 322 AD. But the one I learned in school, it was mentioned that the first kingdom that was found in Indonesia was only found on the 4th century. See how history has changed in due course. And I'm also glad to say, I'm proud to say that the Salakanagara is actually where I come from. I come from West Java, and this is the land where my father comes from, right? It is in the very west of Java. It's called Banten. And what is so interesting about this story, because this is the first recorded history that the first king was actually someone from India. I mean, now Bharat, yeah. The name of Salakanagara actually means the land of the silver. And it's so interesting also. I don't know if Ptolemy, the Greek philosopher, what's his name? Ptolemy. He says he mentioned about Argir. So some historians are mentioning maybe Argir is something to do with Salakanagara, the land of the silver. Before it became a kingdom, Indonesia was like only full of, consists of tribes. I think also in the during the in Kalinga in Orissa, also there were like tribes like that. It was the same in Indonesia. There were only tribes, not really kingdoms. But the owner of this place in a harbor in West Java, the city now called Pandeglang, his name is Akitiram. He was facing problems because he was attacked by bands and bandits and all that. Then one day came a merchant from India, and he was also mentioned as an ambassador or a emissary or something from the Pallava dynasty. He married his daughter called Pohaci Larasati. So when this union happened, then they started to build the kingdom. The whole reason was to protect the harbor that belonged to Akitiram. But that is how the first kingdom in Indonesia started. So the king was from the Pallavan dynasty, and then the queen was a local West Javanese. But if we talk about Dvipantara, which is consisting of Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and all that, this was not the latest, the earliest discovery. There are others also. Maybe if you've heard in Borneo, there is a place where now it's called, belongs to Malaysia, called the Bujang Valley. So the Bujang Valley is dated in 535 BC. And over there, we can find statues of Ganesha Murtis, and Shiva Murtis. So the connection has been there since even the beginning of the century. But what's interesting, we find other findings also. It is not only in the beginning of the century, even before Christ also, right? So this Bujang Valley was in 535 BC. We always hear about the Chola dynasty launched naval raids on Sriwijaya, which is in Swarnadwipa, but this only happened in 1025. So basically between this Pallava and Chola dynasty, they have always been these rivalries, the feud they have had since centuries. And what I'm saying that is the Chola dynasty did not invade Sriwijaya as Indonesia. I would say, they're relatives who used to fight each other since centuries before, right? And another thing, even if after Deva Warman, that's the first king of Salakanagara, before he came, in Indonesia, we have already adopted the Sanatan Dharmic values. Mostly it is, we focus more on the worshipping of elements and also the Vedic deities. As if in India, you focus more on the Puranic deities, right? But in Indonesia, we focus more on the Vedic deities. So if you see the picture there on the top left, it's actually a picture, a statue of Kuber. You don't really find a lot of Kuber statues in India, but in Indonesia, in Java, especially in Bali, you find a lot of Kuber statues. It's very famous. And then also the one below there, the picture, it is actually the statue of Varuna. We call him here Varuna. If you see, the body is from a fish, but it has a head of an elephant. So sometimes people thought, is this Indra? No, actually, this is Varuna because the body of the vehicle is actually a fish. Yeah. And if we connect it with the Sindhu Saraswati civilization, people in Sindh worship Julelal, right? Varuna. So similarities are there. Until now, Varuna or Baruna in Indonesia is very much worshipped and then considered as one of the famous deities. But the most famous is to the right. This is the Javanese version of Indra, with the vehicle, Airavata, the elephant. Until now, it is considered very important deity, as if I understand in India, you don't find temples of Indra, but in Indonesia, in Java and Bali, you can find places, especially the murtis of Indra. It's quite, he's quite famous here, yeah. And in the land of Dvipantara, which is including Southeast Asia, we were Naga worshippers. If you go to Vietnam, you go to Cambodia, you find all this, or Thailand, you find all the statues of serpents up to Indonesia. So in the Javanese tradition, serpents are placed in a respectable position. We even name, the serpent is actually, as you know, is Vasuki. But in the local name, we call it Basuki. Right? And we do give the name Basuki to our children because it's considered a very auspicious name, because it means peace, safe, and secure. And the role of Basuki, the serpent god, is to harmonize nature and also to safeguard the earth. If you see in ceremonies in the Javanese tradition that is still practicing the Sanatan values, right? When the time of harvest, Basuki is playing the big role here. Very much worship. And it is also connected to the stories of Samudra Manthan. Again, the connection is there between India, Indonesia, or what we called before the Sindhu Sunda Saraswati civilization. The link is always there. Another important connection that is linked between India and Indonesia, this is before the BC, and it is famous now, celebrated in India, especially in Orissa, if you've heard of the Bali Yatra. Okay. The Bali Yatra is actually at the end of the 2nd century BC. So by the end of the 2nd century BC, Indian mariners or sailors appear to have learned enough about the monsoon winds and ocean, the ocean currents, to attempt a more southern route across the Indian Ocean to the Isles of Indonesia. So this voyage was done to obtain spices, trade spices, pearls, gems, silk, camphor, beeswax, and sandalwood from the Bali trading. So again, they reached to Bali. Of course, they didn't travel straight away from India or Orissa to Bali, but they stopped first, in the Swanadwipa, and then they went first to other places like in Malaysia. Of course, now the modern map of Malaysia and all that, until they reached Java and Bali. So this is now commemorated every year in Orissa, I think around November, called the Bali Yatra. So to remember their ancestors traveled all the way through from Orissa to Bali. Right? In here, what we can learn is that one should not be under the impression that influences always flowed unidirectional from India to Southeast Asia, but it's actually far from it. The whole Indian civilization is actually enriched in many ways by influences from one and the other, because again, we were one, we share the same common root of civilization. For instance, if we talk about pan, I first thought, pan was from India. Actually, it was not. I remember when I was a child, my great-great-grandmother used to, chew pan all the time, but a different kind from the ones in India. So I went to learn the history of pan. Actually, it was not from India. It is actually from the land of Dvipantara. Right. So this is how we find things so much familiar and similar in both countries. So we can say that we are brothers and sisters. But of course, sometimes if we talk about G2G, it's quite difficult. So it's easier from people to people. and if you tell the Indonesians like, oh, you're my little brother, no, they won't like it. They won't like it, right? And not only that, what is actually interesting, they had a research, genetical research, the DNA research. And it shows that most Balinese men carry the genetics of Indian, of the Indian DNA. So we say that, India came to Indonesia to spread Hinduism, not Hinduism. I do not believe the term ism, because Hindu is not an ism. Actually, is a way of life. It's a Sanatan Dharma, because ism means creeds, dogmas, and all that. In Hindu, there is no creeds and dogma. We are free to self-discovery and all that. And we have that already in Indonesia. It is just what the tradition that we have now in Indonesia. It is an assimilation. It is what was formed because of this two marriage, right? So because they have fights in here saying, oh, we Hindus here are so different from Hindus in India, so we are not the same. Yeah, but we have the same root. It does not matter if it's this, it's different. But what this thing is that we are from one cultural roots, and it is always depending on the geography. What grows here would be different from what grows in the other part of the place, right? So the genetic variation in the Y chromosomes of 551 Balinese men to investigate the relative contributions of Austronesian farmers and pre-Neolithic hunter-gatherers to the contemporary Balinese paternal gene pool, and to test the hypothesis of recent paternal gene flow from the Indian subcontinent. So basically, India, Indonesia have since a long time connected ties. Imagine they keep on discovering more and more. Bujang Valley was not known, Salaka Nagara was not known, but now history comes and being discovered more and more. Even what's interesting, stories as folklores and all that. Now scientists even can prove it, that some folklores have actually scientific evidences. So we can't just dismiss a story as just folklores, because those stories, most of it, are based on some actual happenings. Right. Okay. Now maybe it's lunchtime in your time, so I'm going to show you here. This is also the Indian and Indonesian ties. Okay. What can you see on the left side, that white big round thing? I'm sure you know what that is, right? It's actually appam, right? And the one that is to the right is, we call it ape. In South India, you call it appam, and to the right in Indonesia, we call it ape. And we have another version of appam also. It's not, it's spelled APEM. And the one to the right side, to the lower side, right? This is actually, do you know what it is? The green one with coconut flakes on the bottom one. Do you know what that is?
Putta.
Yes, puta. And in Indonesia, we call it putu. It's actually, we call it putu. And I did not know all these things until I started, because I love food, I love cooking, and I love South Indian food, and I love the food where I come from, Indonesia, Sundanese food. And to learn the history, oh my God, I didn't know that in South India they have putta, yeah, putta also like that, what you just mentioned. And why I did not know that this putu was from either, I don't know which started it. Is it in Tamil or from the land of Swarnadvipa? We never know. But you know, the marriage was there. So even the food was there. In where I come from, West Java, we have a soup called asam. And of course, in South India, you have rasam, right? And then we think that, oh, this is like specialty only belongs to this country, but actually look at the marriage. Isn't it beautiful, even in food, in culture and all that. And now we go to the modern connection. Sukarno and Nehru, they were buddies like anything. They were best friends like anything. And if we remember the history of it, both Sukarno and Nehru, though they were the two leaders who initiated the, we call it the non-bloc, right? The non-bloc, Asia-Africa non-bloc. Basically, they wanted to strengthen the relationship between Asia and Africa and the nations in the southern, right, in southern parts of the globe. And this went on for quite a long time until the Cold War, because one was pro the USSR, one was pro for the US. But this connection, it was so much linked. Not only they were good in connection as personalities, but they both understood the history of both countries. What is interesting also, before we had our independence, we had a journal, right? We had a journal which is headed by the Muslim party in Indonesia, but the name of the newspaper or the journal was actually Delegates of the Indies. Yeah, so it was not called Indonesia. We were called the Hindia. We were called the Hindia. There was not yet Indonesia or India. So we always consider one another as close related and very much connected to one another. Now what is living in Indonesia is mostly like what I was mentioning. If we talk about Hindu, it is more in the Vedic times, whereas now in India, in the Hindu is mostly on the Puranic deities. Yeah. And what is also similar, the way we greet one another with Anjali Mudra, Namaskar, because we believe also in the protection of one's energy, right? Shaking hands and all that. That was not the custom of the Sanatani. And of course, worshiping the elders. Also, it was part of the culture. Like for instance, here, the way we see Sukarno, this is the first president of Indonesia, bowing to his mother. This was the ancient way we used to dress the ladies. Right? And this is the way, the two men, that is how the traditional way of shaking hands, right? Sometimes they don't touch each other. It is just sometimes the tips of the fingers. But this one is because they are so much intimate, so they touch hands. And look at both, one the Indian woman and one the Balinese woman. We all greet with the same way of folding our hands. So if we talk about the connection of India and Indonesia, that's why the title is from time immemorial. It goes back to the Ramayana times, maybe before that, because the land was one. So that is actually my presentation. I would prefer for us to delve more into, interaction, into interaction. And please, if you have any questions, you're most welcome